Good to have you on, Sharon, and good to see you. I'm glad we can hear you now, too. Lots to talk about here. Look, if Canadians head to the polls as soon as April 28th, that would be a quick election campaign. What are the Liberals trying to do here? What's the strategy?
Well, I think what the most important thing for them and what they're focusing right now on is creating an actual mandate for Prime Minister Carney. Now, yes, there's a lot of debate whether they can call the House back and have a confidence vote, but he's going to have his own slate of candidates that are coming on board as well. He is going to have an election because all we're hearing from the opposition is that he doesn't have a seat. So it's not lost on him and the team that he needs to get out there, he needs to get a seat, and it'll truly be a refresh from the previous Liberal government. So a lot of this has to do with that, but a lot of it also has to do with not waiting out too long in order to deal with the U.S. We saw how tumultuous the last couple months have been between Prime Minister Trudeau and Donald Trump, and I think what we're seeing now is a bit of a change in temperature. So the Liberals want to get out there. They want an election. The polls are telling them that Mark would be the best person as Prime Minister to deal with someone like Donald Trump. So I think they're using the time to their advantage.
Does Mark Carney have enough name recognition to do this, though? Because there could be a lot of Canadians who go, I just don't know the guy yet.
Yeah, and I think it depends on who you talk to. Like, if you ask someone that I would talk to or work with, they probably would know who Mark Carney is. But there's a lot of parts of the country that aren't necessarily tuned into central bankers or who he was before this. But generally speaking, I think he has some name recognition. He has more than I think people believe he does. But Pierre Poilievre is a pretty household name in Canada as well. So I think they're going to have to get him, his ideas, his policies, and his personality out there.
Yeah, we've talked about Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. Here's who I want to talk about right now. Jagmeet Singh. All eyes on the fate of the NDP here, Sharon, as you know, because already there's a lot of talk about the progressive vote. And if people start voting strategically, that would not bode well for Jagmeet Singh and his party. What are you watching for there?
Yeah, it's Jagmeet Singh is a very personable person, but the one thing you'll notice these days, I think it was today, after quite some time, that I saw a news clip where Jagmeet was getting coverage. He hasn't been part of the conversation. He hasn't even been, I would say, penetrating through the news cycle day to day because we've been so focused on Canada, U.S. and what's happening. Now, that being said, Jagmeet Singh has a lot to lose here. He does not appear to be or have the NDP in a position where they're actually contending and they're contenders in this race. It pretty clearly is showing that this is a race between the Liberals and the Conservatives because it's so close. And I think there will be some people from the NDP party who are not overtly ideological that will say, you know what, we need to stop here. We'll give the Liberals our vote.
Okay, everybody has vulnerabilities going into this election, as we've talked about. What's interesting here, though, is that both Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney have been criticized for not being able to take tough questions from reporters. They've both had very testy moments, and the election hasn't even been called yet. You know, you've advised politicians before. How damaging is that to their respective campaigns?
Well, my strategy with every candidate and politician that I've worked with has always been the media is your friend. And not because you want to be buddies, but because it's always really important to provide access because that's how the story gets out there. Alienating them doesn't exactly work. And we've seen Pierre Poilievre for some time very much say that mainstream media is like not on his side. We've seen his position on the Canadian broadcaster. And we just saw it 2 days ago where his campaign team put out a notice saying there will be no media on the Conservative plane or bus, which is a break from tradition, which is quite old. And their argument is that it's because it's too expensive and we want to give local journalists the opportunity and we'll make sure everyone has time. I've done this long enough to know that that is a pretty, I would say, there's no polite way of saying it, but that is the worst excuse to use because it's not the case. It's limiting media's access. So I'm not sure how they think that's a winning strategy, but it's all going to depend on what people hear and how they want to vote.
And I do want to give you a chance to just comment on Mark Carney's, testy moment. I believe it was in London when,
yes.
Some have accused him of being defensive when taking questions from reporters. He's obviously not a politician. He's a numbers guy. Bad moment for Mark Carney, Sharon?
Yeah, I definitely think that his tone and tenor was probably not the best in that given circumstance. It doesn't bode well when you're edgy, and I think he will be working on that. Now, someone like Mark Carney is not a traditional politician. He has been in front of the camera quite some time, but from a very different perspective. He's not trying to get votes, and his personality is he's frank, he's blunt, he's down to business, he wants to get stuff done. That being said, half of what we do is how we present ourselves and how we speak to people. So I think he will learn very quickly that he has to be a bit more lenient with the reporters with how he responds.
Okay, because Canadians are watching. Sharan Kaur, partner at Sovereign Advisory and former deputy chief to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Good to have you on. Thank you.
Thanks.